a longtime friend of my family's, Brother Orison, and we are going to have a little interview here together. So this is a little bit awkward for the camera, but I'm going to turn it on to him when he's talking, and he's going to discuss, or here, I'll introduce Orson here.
Good afternoon.
He is very experienced with Christ Church, the branch, and he has a lot of history in this brain of his. um, I love this man, and he's going to share with us some of his experiences with the priesthood and the priesthood keys, some history with Rulon and Allred, Gerald Sr., and we're going to just have a discussion here for a little bit. Um, Brother Orson is 84 years old. Is that right, Orson? Yeah. So his energy isn't always up to what he's wanting to do. So we'll just talk until he feels like that's enough for today. And then another time, we'll hopefully be able to do like a part 2 or 3 or whatever we need to do to get some of this history. And he's going to teach us some of the early church history that happened. How far back are we going to go, do you think, to start with?
1960 or thereabouts.
1960. Okay.
Yeah, about that.
So, and that starts with the rule and Allred?
I'm on a mission right then.
You're on a mission?
And then just within 2 years, then we're in the fullness.
So it goes to, it's Joseph Musser is right before that.
That is correct.
And then it goes to Rule and Allred. So feel free to start and give us some of that history, and then I'll jump in as I have questions or if I see other people having questions with us.
Okay. I just gave a generalization on that year. I got off on a mission, and I think it was 1962. Got married the very next day. And I know that sounds very unusual, and it took a lot of manipulating between the mission president in LA. Had no interest really at that time in plural marriage.
How old were you at this time?
I guess I was 22 or 23.
Okay.
We got married in the Logan Temple. I was caught off guard on all of the things of the changing. I was overseeing Los Angeles in my mission. So all of a sudden I had nobody to tell anything to do or direct or call. And Gloria Dawn and I were trying to decide what we're going to do in life. We had hundreds, probably 50 or 60 questions that we were asking. Where do we live? What kind of income should we expect? Should we work for the garbage? I'm making it up. Be an electrician, be a psychiatrist, go in the Air Force. I am not going at this time to give the exact question, but it had to do with our moral lives that we wanted to ask a question on, and so we did. And making sure Gloria was raised by Gerald Sr. And Gerald Sr. says there are 2 things we need to do as a minimum. We need to keep the Sabbath day holy. And if we keep the Sabbath day holy, we can expect to get God answering our prayers, whether we're 12 years old, whether they're 90 years old. And Gloria had got a lot of answers to prayer. I was starting to get answers to prayer in half of my mission, so we were expecting to get some answers from God. And once again, I'm not going to give the question, but I'm going to give the answer about we'd been married maybe 15 days by this time. And all of a sudden, and it was Gloria's turn to ask this question, included with others, and all of a sudden she's heard God's Spirit say, "Yes, my daughter, and only in this way can plural marriage be lived in righteousness." We wasn't asking anything about plural marriage. So we went and asked her dad the following weekend. Her dad's Gerald W. Peterson Sr. He was on the High Council in North Cache. That's the county and the stake that's right on the Utah border there in Cache Valley. And he handed us lots and lots of books immediately. I mean, we didn't even get out of there without us carrying all these books. Then we found out he was currently living plural marriage. But she didn't know that. Gloria didn't know that.
His daughter didn't know that
Her daughter didn't know.
Wow.
And now I'm going to go backwards a little bit. Now we've talked about Gerald Sr., that we've got involved with him. Gerald Sr., and I'll go over this quickly, but I'll make some very important issues of those important headings. He was not a Mormon. He moved with his family from eastern Wyoming into Cache Valley, which is the Logan, Mendon, Wellsville area. And of course, they saw the temple up there, and they're non-Mormons. And his dad said, "Gee, I realize we've moved into all these Mormons here, so be very careful. They're dangerous." I'm exaggerating that a little bit. He met Faye, which became his first wife, and started dating her. She didn't know that he was not a Mormon immediately, but within a short time she found out he wasn't a Mormon. And she was talking to her dad, "This Gerald Peterson is such a gentleman, and he's so hungry to talk about the gospel, but he doesn't really know that much about the gospel." And so her father said, "Well, let's get acquainted." And he ended up getting baptized, contrary to the wishes of his parents. Now, forgive me if I start crying, because a lot of this is good memories. Well, his parents were about ready to disown him, but they liked Faye. And making a long story short, within about 12 years, he had baptized every one of his family. And his mother became a high-quality genealogist the rest of her life. He had different occupations, but he loved electronics. He loved radio communication. He loved electricity. He had gone to several schools from Washington, D.C. to Chicago to Los Angeles. And before he finally, in the long, long run, ended up being a doctor. But when they were first married, at one period of time, probably within a year, maybe a year and a half, he ends up in Provo. And whatever job he had been given in the church, he didn't just settle for just walking into the room. If there was 15 people that were supposed to attend over the next 3 weeks, he would go find out why they're not attending and get them there. And after a while, after like a year or so, he got a reputation in Salt Lake City. Well, the average people attending is like 30 to 40%. But what is this 60 and 65%? And it's this Gerald Peterson. He's bringing people to church and getting them to come to church. So he became familiar to them, even as a very young man. Not that he had any very important calling, but as time went on, he got acquainted with many of the apostles. He particularly enjoyed Ezra Taft Benson, and he personally knew David O. McKay. come over that he went over to Dave McKay's home every weekend and they had a picnic. But as they identified, oh, that's Brother Peterson. He's the one that's always bringing the attendance up on whatever he does. Well, he's at Provo at this particular time, and he's wanting to make sure that he has all the most detailed information in the class that he's teaching. He got permission to go into the BYU library, which you had to get a recommend to go at that time. Now we're talking about the year 1940, so I'm now jumping back a number of years. And they didn't have regular, normal photocopy machines, so it was pencil or paper and pencil. And all of a sudden, he's noticing in some of the old records, plural marriage, the law of Sarah, united order, the law of consecration. You say, gee, they don't teach any of this. And so he's copying more and about, but as the more he does, he's starting to read where it's absolutely essential if you want to become a God that you've got to be willing to engage in taking upon yourself as a man more than one wife to lead her in righteousness. And so he tells his wife, we're really supposed to be living plural marriage. And his wife says, now, Gerald, number one, when the prophet says for us to take another wife, the door's open. But until that, and until the law is such that we're not going to find you're in jail, then please don't bring up that subject. He thought, well, gee, this is a really important subject. And, I've read Brigham Young quoting Joseph Smith and John Taylor and Heber C. Kimball, and a number of others talking about the law of plural marriage. So I'm going to talk to the bishop. The bishop says, well, Brother Peterson, that's a no subject. You just can't be bringing that up. It causes trouble. So he goes to stake president. Took a while to get a meeting with the stake president. Says, look, here's everything I copied. And it's all about plural marriage and other subjects. Why aren't we doing it? And the stake president, much older than the bishop, says, well, Brother Peterson, everything you're telling me is true, but the law won't allow us to do it now. And I'm asking you not to do anything, promote it, ask about it. Otherwise, I will be required to excommunicate you. And you are doing such an excellent job, I don't want to lose you. So then he said in his mind, well, if I can't get in, maybe I could go to one of the apostles, but, I'm not sure that's in my timeline right now, but I'm just going to settle down with God. So he's praying and praying and praying. And finally he gets a revelation, and God says, his question is, are we supposed to be living plural marriage? Why is it not going on? And this may not be word for word, but it's in general. Yes, my son, those principles are essential for your exaltation, but you are not to live all the good you can in the church. Okay, I'm guessing he was 22 years old by now.
Okay.
About every 2 or 3 years, he goes to the Lord again, asks the very same question, he gets the very same answer. When by this time he's in the stake presidency, he's gone from being a radio man. The reason he was in Provo was to build a radio station, not the walls, but all the equipment and the towers, and then to operate it.
Mm-hmm.
So he was, eventually he moved to Ogden. He built another radio station there. So he has had a lot of training in so many different things. So he says, well, do I dare tell my wife this revelation? I'm not too sure I dare tell. I don't, I love this lady. She's a wonderful lady. And she's kind of given me a law. Her word was, when the will of the Lord it is, and the prophet tells me to do it, I'll do it. But not until. So,
And this was Faye's, his wife?
yes,
Right.
Gloria Dawn, Jerry's mother.
Okay.
Approximately when he's 42, so we're dealing with about a 20-year period. Once again, he's gone and asked that same question. He's given the same answer, but this particular time, the Lord says, basically the same but said, my son, very soon I will introduce you to he that holds the keys of this priesthood. And now, because he knew David O. McKay, and he knew Ezra Taft Benson, and he knew several others, there's some that he wasn't really, Hubie Brown, he wasn't too excited about. He's quite a liberal in his way of thinking. He was a gentleman and fantastic speaker. I mean, he could sway a rattlesnake. But so he was thinking one of them was going to come knocking on the door or send a letter. Will you please come in? Because now he's got a revelation and God's answered him for hundreds of questions over the last 20 years. So he's familiar with the voice of the Spirit. Well, as a doctor, and I'm a contractor, nurses, doctors, lawyers, they all have to have continuous education in order to keep their license, which you go to seminars. Well, he went to a seminar, which was routine and normal, which he had been doing for a number of years. And at this, he was a naturopathic doctor, even though he studied many other things and he could do other things that were beyond that he was licensed for. But Rulon Allred happened to be the one that had been voted in to be the spokesman for the naturopaths in these different presentations. And he didn't know him personally. He was just one of 150 people between herbalists and health food nuts and doctors and nurses that would come. But I thought, wow, he's sure given a very good presentation. And right in the midst of this, he hears the Spirit of God say, that man holds the keys of the priesthood. And he said he almost felt like he was going to pass out. Like, what? He's just a doctor. Nobody, I mean, if I hadn't been to this meeting, I wouldn't even know who he was. But it's not David McKay or Ezra Taft Benson. I don't understand. And the meeting finally got over, and he said, I've got to go and talk to this man. I know I heard God's voice, but it's not making sense. So he rushed up and introduced himself, says, Dr. Allred, I'm Dr. Peterson. I really enjoyed your presentation, but I have a very personal question to ask. Could we step to the side where we have a little privacy? And they did. And now, if you knew Dr. Peterson, if you knew Gerald Peterson, he's a man that could stand before the governor. He could stand before the president of the United States. He could stand before anyone and have a he could stand with Einstein and have a very intelligent discussion and conversation. He was very well educated and very calm, but he said, I was suddenly very, very worried. How can this be? And so finally says, well, Dr. Allred, do you hold the keys of the priesthood? And Brother Rulon looked him in the eye and said, and pointed to him, you have already been told. I mean, what? Oh my word, overwhelming. I can hardly believe what's going on. So he went and grabbed him and said, please, could I have your card? I need to talk to you. If you knew Dr. Allred, now you knew Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, multiply 3 times what you saw Jerry trying to do. That's what Brother Rulon was trying to do. Probably you get an average of 4 hours sleep. He's delivering babies, having regular, plus he was going to different places in the United States for meetings and into Mexico. Extremely busy. Had a lot of wives, and he was meeting a lot of meetings. Anyway, he said, I can't talk to you now. I've got to go. I've got other meetings. Anyway, Gerald Sr., I thought, this is just blowing my mind. If someone would have told me this, I said, nah, but I heard God's Spirit tell me this. And I've been praying for this for 20 years. And I've heard God's voice 20 years on this subject. And he finally culminated by, I will reveal to you who holds these keys. And then he tells me right in the middle of a meeting, he's the one that holds them. Well, so he had a number of very quickie meetings when he would go from Cache Valley down to the Salt Lake area. He would drop off his wife and kids to do shopping or do whatever they needed to do. And then he would go see Brother Rulon for maybe a half hour. And Brother Rulon handed him a lot of books, which he had to kind of keep hid, so no one in the family knew about it. And then one day, he was very stressed. He says, I love my wife with all my heart. I love these kids and the grandkids. Now, once again, this is probably 6 months to a year before I got off the mission that this is taking place. My mind just blanked out. Give me just a second here.
You're fine. So you're talking about how Rulon is meeting up with Gerald, and Gerald is...
It's kind of the reverse. Gerald is meeting up with him.
Yeah, Gerald's meeting up with Rulon.
Okay, right. Now I remember.
Okay.
So he meets with Brother Rulon. Once again, these were not long, lengthy meetings because his family was someplace in Salt Lake doing shopping or a movie. And he said, I've got a real problem here. I love this lady with all my heart, but she told me she would not. She didn't want me to talk about this. She didn't want me in jail. It was against church. And until the prophet told her to do it, she's not going to do it. Am I supposed to divorce her? And he said, no. And I'm ad-libbing a little bit, but to get over a point here. He said, no, the Spirit tells me she's a good woman. You bring her in on the pretense you're going to get some medical material. And so he did. And of course, when he got into town, into the Salt Lake area, he'd get in a phone booth. I didn't have smartphones. Booths were every service station usually. Cafe or restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And he just called and said, Brother Rulon, my wife's with me, and when would I drop by? And he'd say, okay, you're probably best between 2:30 and 3, and just come there and just come right in. And so he came in, Faye sitting in the car. At this time, Gloria was on a stake mission in Idaho, or she was going to school, I can't remember. So the only child, the other has off married, and the youngest one was Desmond, and he was maybe, I think, 8 years old. So he was oblivious of what this was all about, as long as he could go to a movie and watch things down there in Salt Lake. And he walked out. Now, Grandma Faye, by this time, had heard that he's a polygamist. And in her mind, he's got to be a dirty old man. He's got to be very sensual,
Talking about Rulon Allred.
talking about Rulon. And he made no that
Yeah.
I'm going to be steer clear of him.
Okay.
And Gerald to steer clear of him. Came out, he extended his hand towards her to shake hands. And she thought, oh, brother, I don't want to shake hands with him. But she was a very courteous lady. So she shook hands with him. And there was 2 or 3 minutes. Hi, how are you? How's the doctoring? How's the weather? Nothing of great importance, but just fill in to get acquainted. And as they pulled off, he went back, Dr. Rulon went back into the office, and as they pulled off, Grandma Faye started crying, and she said, I don't understand, Gerald. Because she personally knew David O. McKay, and she's shaken David O. McKay's hands, knew several of the apostles, because Gerald was very well recognized by them of being able to bring a lot of people into whatever he was responsible, whether it was helping the bishopric or stake presidents or whatever. He says, well, I don't understand. His spirit is so strong, and he's a polygamist. I don't understand. In fact, his spirit is probably more powerful, at least as powerful as David O. McKay's. I don't understand. And so Gerald says, well, Faye, I want to tell you a lot about the last 20 years in my prayers and what's been going on. Well, she says, I want to meet. She says, I've got a witness. I don't understand. It's not making sense. I need to be taught. My mind is in a whirl here. And so she did talk with him, and she was so impressed with him. But she still, maybe he's really clever. Maybe he's very smart, and he knows how to trick me. I want to talk to his wives.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know if that was 2 months away, but she ended up talking to his wives, and I probably will not remember, but one was a set of twins. I know the 4 ladies. I knew almost all of his wives because there was 2 that had died before I was involved. Anyway, the four wives were together, and she had a list of questions to ask, and and they were making sense. But this was a whole new world that these women love that same man, and they love each other.
So Faye Peterson was meeting up with Rulon Allred's wives.
Yeah, 4 of them.
Okay.
He had more, but there was 4 that were currently in that Salt Lake area. And one of the questions she asked was, what does that man expect when he gets in bed with you?
Uh-huh.
And they, in unison, said, he is a gentleman. He never approaches us for sex unless we invite him. And we only invite him if we want to have a baby. Anyway, all of the questions she asked, all of the answers, because that was just one question. There's probably 40 or 50 that I'm not even getting involved with there. But that was the one that sold her. I'm ready. And now, Brother Rulon, now I'm trying to hit high points,
Mm-hmm.
and yet very important points. Because if there was time, we could spend 3 times as much in the same period. But this one has to do with David O. McKay. Brother Rulon approached them because they're living in Richmond, Utah, and they're living in Blackfoot, Idaho. They have 2 offices, and they come to Salt Lake probably every other week, but once in a while every week after the regular meetings in Cache Valley.
Because he's a doctor, and so he's doing practicing in these spots?
Yes, those 2 places. His biggest following was up in Blackfoot, Idaho, but he had maybe a fourth that much there in Cache Valley. And it was a very successful one. Anyway, Brother Rulon takes them into a room after a meeting in the Brown House, as I recall. No, it wasn't the Brown House. The Brown House wasn't built then.
Rulon's polling Gerald Sr.
Yeah.
Peterson Sr.
Yeah. I would like you two to come in here in a little room. I want to talk to you. And I don't know where, but I'm guessing it was in Owen Allred's big garage that was like about a 5-car garage, and they were having meetings there. And said there is a lady that has several children, that the husband has failed to be a proper priesthood man, and he's losing several of his wives. They're leaving him. And I'm asking you to consider, you two, to consider taking this lady and these children. Her name's also Faye.
Oh. Wow.
Her name's Winnie Faye. And into the family. And so they're, wow. I mean, thought of getting into it where, you know, we'd start with a wife and then have a child, but have one that's already got 5 kids. And so they're praying about it. They went home, and they're both sincerely praying about it and wondering about it and pondering about it, saying, gee, boy, that's, you know, it'll only take 2 or 3 words out, and we've totally lost our practice. What are we to do? I mean, if that's what God wants, but so they're praying. And that night, or maybe immediately after the prayer, in a dream, individually, they both had a dream, and David O. McKay is in the dream. And he's saying, yes, you take that lady in and you live plural marriage with her, but do not hurt me or the church. And it ended. And so right there, David O. McKay was the president of the church asking Faye to live plural marriage.
Oh, I see the connection there.
Now, I know I'm missing pieces, but it's okay. So they go to Rulon the next weekend back into to the Murray area. Says, we got to talk to you. This is blowing our minds. Why would David O. McKay come to us and tell us to live plural marriage when he is at the same time excommunicating people for living plural marriage? And, well, I've got to tell you, but this has got to be kept confidential.
Mm-hmm.
David O. McKay and I have liaisons, and one of them was Gary Watson, and I knew him very well. And he travels back and forth, passing messages back and forth. And David O. McKay knows that I hold the keys to the priesthood. And at the very same time, I know he holds the keys to govern the church. But we're doing the very best we can to serve God. Now, they were astounded and they were happy. Now, I'm going to jump back again. Jumping back this time, David O. McKay, a short time after he had been called in to be president of the church, and Heber J. Grant had been the president two men before. I can't remember the one that was just before. And Heber J. Grant had no mercy on anybody that lived plural marriage, whether it was a man, woman, or a child.
So it was George Albert Smith and then David O. McKay.
Okay, so it'd be George Albert Smith. Anyway, but a lot of people, stake presidents, bishops, leaders from Mesquite, Panaca, Caliente, Kanab, Cedar, St. George, all through Iron County, were just overwhelmed with the polygamists that were coming in and being part in the society that were principally living in Colorado City or Hilldale. What do we do about them? And they wanted David O. McKay to come down, and David O. McKay came, and he knew the question. When he arrived, he said, "Brethren, I want to go totally by myself and pray before I go into answering your question." And he prayed to say to God, "What am I supposed to do? What? You know, Heber J. Grant was ruthless, and it caused the church a lot of embarrassment worldwide because he was so harsh, putting people into jail. The President of the United States was complained against. The governor of Utah and the church leader was complained from countries all over the world how the church is so unkind to polygamists and that it didn't make any sense. And so I don't want to make the same mistake, but what am I supposed to do?" Well, he came out. The Lord talked with him. Now, the record that I have is very, very slim. So I have to add a little bit to it. But the record that I have is that Jesus said, "Tell them to cease and desist the polygamists and for them to take care of their stewardship and that leave the polygamists to him, the Lord." Anyway, that, according to the pieces, that's when David O. McKay found out. That's when he found out that he didn't have the presiding keys. By that time, it was Joseph Musser that had the presiding keys, I think, or Leslie Broadbent. I don't remember, but he was living it secretly. Anyway, Brother Rulon further said that he has more than one wife, and that he's living it right now. He's currently living plural marriage secretly. So yes, David O. McKay in doing the very. Now, I realize we haven't got a long way, but we've covered some very important parts. Okay, now Gerald Sr. did take that wife and those children. He did get some threats. Brother Rulon actually took one of the wives. The wife that went to Gerald Sr. was a direct relative to Rulon. So he didn't feel the Lord didn't want him to take a relative, one who takes, so Gerald Sr. And now, as time goes on, Gerald Sr., it soon became evident by numerous people that Gerald Sr. had a whole list of revelations that he had received in his life, and he had records of them. And so there was a little bit of envying because there was those in the council. Now, Brother had the presiding keys of the priesthood, and he had a council of 7 high priest apostles. Now, there's one time he had less, and there's one time that he had more, depending on who died and who was put in. And that is one organization. David O. McKay is in charge of the church with 12 apostles, plus there was bishoprics and stake presidents. So they're 2 different organizations, but they all come under the umbrella of the kingdom of God. The keys of the priesthood, in essence, is a symbolic of the celestial kingdom and the organization of the church of the firstborn. The church of Jesus Christ is symbolic or representing of the terrestrial kingdom, and the leaders that we know that the church of Jesus Christ will exist in the terrestrial kingdom for eternity. After everybody it will be prevalent there. We have another level of law of the kingdom of God on a lower level, being the telestial, but in the celestial, it'll be this higher quorum. And I've only just touched you because you're going to have patriarchs that are sealed to patriarchs that are sealed to patriarchs. There won't be anyone that's in the celestial kingdom, even if it's an angel, which is in the lower of the third kingdom, that will be sealed to somebody. File leadership will be absolutely the norm of life there. Now, Gerald Sr., a short time after Gloria Dawn and I was married, and this is a little bit different, but it's still important. He took me into his basement there in Richmond, and
Gerald Sr. took you
down his
and
basement
his daughter, whom you were married to.
after we were married.
After
He
we were
didn't
married.
take Gloria down necessarily, but he
Oh.
took me down.
He took you down. Okay.
And he took me into the radio room.
Okay.
And he had radio equipment where sometimes he would talk to somebody in Germany, sometimes in Panama Canal, sometimes just in St. George, because he had all this radio. He had towers where he could talk all over. Any radio man would be familiar with what I'm talking about. But he took me to this cabinet, and he opened the door, and there's nothing in the cabinet. And he says, well, just step back a little bit. And he reached in and he grabbed a little funny knob, and the back of the cabinet opened up. And he said, follow me. And we went in, and he had all kinds of food, medical supplies, anything for germ warfare, ammunition, dental equipment, medical equipment, that he could basically take care of anything. He had made sure that the well and the generator system was such that if there was an attack in America, the grid went out, that he could take care of his needs. And they could all go into that area, close it off, and live in that area. And just to give you a little background now, he was a pilot. He had several planes through the lifetime that before I knew him and after I knew him. So radio man, he's an electrician, he was a plumber, he did the majority of the work, or he worked with others that built that particular house. He tried very hard to do whatever God wanted him, and when Rulon said to do this or do that, and is because of our comfort zone, because of our perspective, we don't usually want to do something that's different than what we've been doing, because we don't know if it's going to work, and it's scary. But he did. He ended up taking that up into Montana, into Pinesdale. And so she was there. So he would go up about every 3 weeks. Now, Brother Rulon, in the beginning of the story, had 2 wives up there, which was not anything to do with the 4 wives I've talked to. This 2 other wives. And then Gloria Dawn and I were asked to move to Montana. And, well, I thought it's, the description of Pinesdale, Montana, I thought, boy, that's the next thing to heaven. In pines, there's and there's a big stream running in the middle and green pastures, and that sounded like great to me. So we moved up, and Brother Rulon, I'm sure that he was planned this. He thought, that Brother Orison and that Sister Orison, they're very enthused, very excited, but they're very green. Both ears are very, very green. And I want to move them. I want them to be so they're close to my wife, Ethel. And, once in a while we would use the car to go back and forth, but quite often we would just drive. It was maybe 1,500 foot away. And that wife was an absolute wonderful woman, a very courageous woman, very woman of great faith. And by that time, died that lived there. And so children were living with Ethel. And Ethel was this kind of girl that, and I use the word girl, a very mature woman, but she's out there milking a cow, planting corn, up at the typewriter, typing things that Rulon said, I need you to type this. She'd give talks in the Relief Society. But there were fictions. And there's, this was not something new. I mean, Joseph Smith, contradictions. We go back to Abraham that was brought up today. Pretty heavy contradiction when God tells Abraham over and over again, I'm going to give you posterity. I'm going to give you some wonderful sons. And then all of a sudden one day, I need you to sacrifice this son. Contradiction. And you wonder, am I losing my mind? Or is this real? And Abraham over and over again said, well, Lord, you told me this, but now you're telling me this. Yes, my son, that's what I'm telling you to do. I'm asking you to do that. Well, Gerald Sr. had things asked that were contradictory. Again, we're not just talking to people. Grandpa Rulon's asked me to do things that were contradictory. Oh, you really want me to do that? And we did. But some things are just a test. Now, I could see problems. And there were things that Brother Rulon, oh, by the way, Gloria Dawn and I, probably within 2 months of us actually coming into the work, that question that we asked God before we ever got into the work, where Gloria got the answer, yes, my daughter, and only in this way can plural marriage be lived in righteousness. We went and asked him. This is an answer. This is a revelation that came to Gloria Dawn. And of course, Gloria Dawn and I had both felt it for about 5 days before we even asked it. Tell us about it. And at first, Brother Rulon said, well, if you want to do that, that's good. That'd be very good. And then 3 days later, he came back, sat us down. He said, that question you asked, I did not do you justice. And I went to the Lord, but I'm supposed to give you instructions. Yes, and I want you to know that Joseph Smith taught it, Brigham Young taught it, Joseph Musser taught it. Once again, I'm not getting into it now because it's a whole new field.
Mm-hmm.
But I found out that hardly anyone knew anything about it. And I was just a little bit amazed. There's a lot of details in living plural marriage that's much different than living monogamy. Agency is absolutely essential. And if a wife wants to have 12 kids and she's willing to raise those 12 kids, that husband has a right to make a responsibility to make sure she has those kids. If a wife says, oh, I only want 4 kids, he doesn't have enough. There's no time in eternity he has enough priesthood that he commands her that she's got to have more. She has agency.
Right.
I mean, in monogamy, it's very common, especially the Muslims. No, you're going to do what I say. Agency. Okay, now I'm going to tell a story. This is all interwoven. On one occasion, I got to backtrack a little bit. The others got put in jail several times for living plural marriage. And there's many times those that were their guards or their overseers, they didn't particularly care about plural marriage, but they made the comment, these men are gentlemen. They're honorable. They're out to take care of their wives and their kids. And we've got people in the neighborhood that men are jumping in bed with everybody, and people are having kids and they don't care about raising them. But these people are raising their kids, they're loving their kids, they're creating a solid. It does not make sense, but we have to do what we have to do. And Brother Rulon got very, very well acquainted with 2 or 3 FBI agents that was on the cases during all of these latter parts. And they learned to have a lot of respect for him and reverence for him. And once again, not that they wanted to live plural marriage. In fact, said Brother Rulon, your love of truth and your love of agency and your love of freedom and the Constitution is so admirable. But the only area you have a problem, we think you're a little crazy, is when you want more than one wife. But if that's what you want, it's our job to protect you. Anyway, this particular occasion, Brother Rulon finds out from an FBI agent that there's warrants for his arrest, Gerald Sr.'s arrest, of Owen Allred's arrest, Orrin Levy's arrest, as I recall, in Montana. And so he said, you need to stop anybody that's going to go up. And now Gerald Sr. had already taken off in his plane from Cache Valley. Owen and several of the brethren already taken off towards Montana. And once again, they didn't have cell phones. It wasn't like what we do now. Even kindergartners have cell phones. I'm exaggerating a little bit.
A little.
And Brother Rulon, so he starts calling and finds, oh my word, they've all gone. And there's a warrant for their arrest. Of course, I'm not going to go because I've got the word. And so he goes into one of the rooms and he raises his arms to sign of the Melchizedek priesthood and commands that angels will intervene. Now, Gerald Sr. had been blessed for many years to have power to work with the weather. But this particular occasion, it had already been stated in the weather report, the weather is going to be fine. There's not going to be a problem in the weather. And so he's flying along just happy as he can be. And all of a sudden, all these clouds form in front of him. He says, well, what's going on? And they're not happy looking clouds. They're get out of my way clouds. Mm-hmm. And so he's praying that they'll go. And they go. And they come back. They go. This goes on for about 10 minutes. And finally he says, something's not right. So he turns around and he lands, to my recollection, he lands in Idaho Falls. And he makes some phone calls. And Faye says, oh, praise the Lord. Brother Rulon says there was a warrant for your arrest. Now, Brother Owen and those with him, as they were coming up into the Montana border from Idaho, on the very top, and I can't remember the city. It's a beautiful, beautiful city there in Idaho. Rivers running through it. Is it Salmon? I don't remember. Anyway, as they're coming up, some snow blower or some
no plow.
No, they're riding a sleigh that's motorized.
Oh, okay.
And
snowmobile,
and they're shooting snow as they're coming up because there's agents sitting right there watching for any Utah cars that's coming in. Well, so they didn't see him. Well, Brother Rulon had some people from Pinesdale go down to Hamilton and be right on the street. and watch. And they caught them as they come into Hamilton to head out miles. Said, "You've got to go another way back." I would park. I'd go park behind someplace, and I'm not sure what they did, but they went another way. Now, Gloria Dawn and I lived in Montana, once again on this FBI thing. There was a big pasture there. There's places where there was lots of trees, but there was a big pasture, and a plane flew around, and then it landed right in the pasture. And then you wouldn't know the man, but his name was Ken Spencer. He comes shooting out there with a little car, and it was an FBI agent that got in with him, and he see Rulon because he had some paperwork for Rulon. He had to go over it and make sure. And he was doing this not as an FBI agent, but as an individual that was trying to keep some peace. There was quite a few times that this happened, not necessarily landing there, but where FBI agent would make contact with them. Once again, because we recognize that you are an honorable man that loves freedom and you'll stand up for the Constitution. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit now about the times that the weather got changed. So probably within 3 weeks of being married to Gloria Dawn, and this is in October, this is the same year that Kennedy gets killed. So it's not really, really cold yet, but it's cold. And November is getting colder. As I remember, the day Kennedy got killed, there'd been some snow, but the temperature seemed like it got down to about 15 degrees at night, which wasn't real bad yet, because at Cache Valley, 20 below was frequent quite often. In fact, I've seen 25 below when I was going to college. Anyway, Gerald Sr., numerous times he had to go different places. Sometimes he would go to Oregon, sometimes he'd go to Denver, sometimes he'd go to Phoenix. Sometimes it had to do with more training because, once again, he took more training than the normal nature path. And this particular time, it was forecast, and this is like about 3 days before he's going to go. Bob Welty, and you may not, someone in the audience may be old enough, they'll remember Bob Welty, but he was the Salt Lake KSL weatherman. Very well known.
Okay.
Very pleasant guy. Says, "We got a bad storm. So if you're planning to go such and such place, I would wait for 4 more days, or I'd go today. But I wouldn't go in these." And so Grandpa's realizing this. And I'm giving a typical. And so Grandpa then goes to the Lord, says, "Lord, I was about to go so-and-so place, and it's right in the middle of this terrible forecast. Do I have permission to change the weather?" And most of the time, but not always, God say, "Yes, my son." And so he would change the weather. How did he do it? In the name of Jesus Christ, and by the power of the holy Melchizedek priesthood, which he held, because he got permission from God, because this wasn't a little tinker toy thing. This would affect hundreds and thousands of people, and the weather would get changed. Well, lo and behold, because I worked out a lot, outside a lot, I was always interested in the weather, and I always want to know what Bob Welty has to say it. Well, the next night he said, "I'm not sure what's going on, but that big storm, it's like it's breaking up. It's up there in Canada, or it's out in the South Pacific, and it's breaking up. I'm not sure." And the next day, "Well, ladies and gentlemen, totally changed. I don't know what happened. Now,
So when you're talking about Grandpa,
Gerald Sr.
you're talking about Gerald Peterson Sr.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just want to clarify that.
Okay, I've told you about one time, but there's dozens and dozens and dozens of times over a number of years that I saw that happen. Now, once again, there's times he was told, no, you can't change it. You will need to change your schedule or just put up with the problem, because God would say, I need this kind of moisture doing this. There's people in such and such place that are praying for this moisture, and if you change it, they won't get it, and I'm going to make sure they get the moisture they've been praying for. I respect that. Now, this sounds so ordinary. I watched it happen. I'm going to tell a story for you. Do you need a break?
No, I mean, we've been going for about an hour, so it depends on if you want to keep going. We can make a part 2 of this. If you guys want him to keep telling some of the history of the early church, let us know. What you're telling a story about, like how you met Gloria, or
this is a weather.
Oh, a weather thing. Okay.
I was always one that wanted to deal with mind over matter and how to control the elements with your mind. And then when I became converted to the gospel, then I looked at it a little bit different. But the third time, I think it was the third time I had a date with her, we was in this kind of a conversation. And I said, I wished I had the kind of faith to be able to do that, because I really believe it can be done, but I've never known anyone to do it. Now, if I remember right, I'm 19 and she's 16. She says, well, Dad has taught us how to work with the weather. And I'm thinking, what? Taught you? Yeah, well, if you want, you can start out by training by disappearing a cloud. Well, I was just kind of humoring her. Oh, okay, go ahead. It's a moonlight night. Yeah, went over there. So she's praying and praying. A few minutes later, the clouds disappeared. And I thought, wow, what a coincidence. That's really a coincidence. And I thought, well, I'll just play along, because I really didn't believe it was real. I picked another direction, maybe 10 miles the other way. And so she's praying and praying, and lo and behold, it disappears. I think, how in the world would a 16-year-old be able to have a cloud 10 miles away disappear? And that was 10 miles that way. And I thought, is this two coincidences at the same time? And then I thought, okay, I picked one that was a lot bigger. And in another direction, I said, she said, okay, this is going to take a little bit more praying because it's a lot bigger. And maybe it took 10 minutes, I don't remember. But it disappeared. And I thought, my word. I took her to the door. I've got to go home. I've got to go home. I've got to be to work at 6 tomorrow morning. And anyway, it was very common in the household.
Okay, so I'm just going to kind of reiterate just history a little. We barely kind of touched on Joseph Musser. We talked about David O. McKay, and some of those prophets and interaction between was very much acquainted with Rulon and Allred, and had interactions and liaisons between each other, where someone would come, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that David O. McKay would see was a candidate for the fullness of the gospel, and between the liaison liaison, he would send them over to Rulon Allred. Is that correct?
He would have them written, say it,
Okay.
in his office, because he suspected very strongly that some of the apostles knew he had more than one wife, and he didn't want to say anything that would get him in trouble. So he would hand paperwork to Brother, I said his name a few minutes ago.
Yeah, he did. That's fine.
And quite often Brother Rulon would have messages to send over that once again they would read them silently, or they would just take them.
Okay.
And make sure. I talked to this same man over probably an 8-year period, saying, I want to hear this story, how this took place, what was happening. And he said, well, his wife, which was one of the secretaries, well knew that I was coming from Rulon, and she just let me right in. Of course, it wasn't as restricted then as it is now. Now it's very restricted. And she would make sure that there wasn't any interruptions, that people would come in, because we wanted to make sure we passed. But we would talk about other things that, if it was being overheard by some of these other apostles, that it wouldn't be incriminating.
Okay. I also heard that his secretary could have been his wife. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Middle Miss, as I recall.
Middle Miss?
I believe that's the name, Middle Miss.
Huh.
And some of that out there will probably say, oh no, you misspelled it.
Okay. So we can call that good for today. We've been going for a little over an hour. History, and when we reconvene, we can pick up at your relationship early with Rulon Allred, and this happened in the late 60s? Frame would that been in that
I think we've got up to about 1968.
Okay. All right. So
we've bounced back and forth in pieces, but
yeah, we're trying to put a puzzle together for you guys, as Brother Orison's been around for a few minutes and trying to pull these memories out of his.
You can tell by the wrinkles.
Out of his memory here, and so but I appreciate you having time with me. And so he doesn't live here; he's like almost 6 hours from me. And so what we'll do, as we're able, we'll connect again over some more live streams, and we'll start at the late 60s, and we'll move forward. And anyway, so we'll move forward with some of this, and I do apologize. For some reason, our internet's not working the greatest. So hopefully, it's not too bad, not too choppy, and hopefully, if there's a piece of the puzzle that's missed because of this, just add it in the comments, and we'll try to fill it in on a later video that we do. And so, with the next videos, we're going to cover some history, Rulon Allred, because you may be aware that Rulon Allred was assassinated. We'll get some history leading up unto that time, and there's some history with Christ Church the Branch, another group called the AUB, or the United Apostolic Brethren, and there's some connections in here that Brother Orison here was very much a part of, and he account of what that happened, and that you can for yourself pray, because he's just telling you his story and his account, and you can take this information and find out and pray for and find out for yourself if you're looking for some truth in regards to some of these things. Because here, let me put it up here so that you can see, and hopefully I'm not going to screw this up too much, but hopefully you can read some of this. but we tell some of this. This is some lineage that we put together of the priesthood, and we've covered some of this, but there's so much history. It's really hard to cover in a brief amount of time, but we're trying to give you and put some pieces together here so you can see some of this history and understand and find out for yourself what you believed.
Praise the Lord.
So, God will bless you. God will keep you. And maybe Orson and I can get together once a week and do something like this. What would you say? Is that possible? Once a week?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. All right. And what day of the week's better for you? So everybody will know that we can kind of put something together.
It can't be too late.
Yeah.
in the
Well,
day.
I'll put a message.
Tell me your schedule.
We'll work it out. Aside from the video, I didn't make this too long. Sorry, and I'll put a message up on the group, and then you guys be able to take that information. You'll understand, and we'll try to make it a regular thing. Anyway, I pray that God will bless you. God will keep you as you search for truth. Until we meet again.
Praise the Lord. We're off now.